Now, one thing, and I think I mentioned this a little this morning, but I just want to reframe it. Why, some people have asked me, why is ARC involved in smart cities? Because, a lot of people have been coming here for 22 years, and they say, well, yeah, we go to the ARC forum to talk about control systems in oil refineries and chemical plants and things like that. And we do that still, and we do it very much. But our company's expanded a lot over the years. We do a lot of IT stuff, cybersecurity types things. And a lot of the things we cover, we do things like building management systems and things like that. But a lot of things we cover have, because of the nature of the products that are used in smart cities today, a lot of it is industrial products. A lot of our suppliers are interested in those markets, so we've started to get involved in those markets. And when I say that a smart city today and control systems type technologies, things like building management systems, electrical systems, gas systems, water and wastewater, transportation, and so on. And also a lot of the smart city initiatives, you see a lot of things going on today. I was fascinated. I went to one event down in DC with Mark Lucev. And it was just these little pilot projects, people doing all kinds of things, little ideas to try to improve service to the citizens or make the efficiency of the government. I mean, things like trash collection, parking systems, all kinds of little pet projects. But if you just sat there and listened, if you come from the world of automation and the industrial world, you'd say, well, that sounds just like the kind of things people are doing, the little pilots they're doing in plants to collect more data, to optimize stuff, come up with new ideas. So they all involve things like data collection and analytics, optimization, processes, optimization, or asset lifecycle management is a very big thing, in industrial space, as well as in smart cities, and development of new processes. And a big thing there is also integration of systems. In this case, one thing we see is a lot of IT systems. If you go to a city, they obviously have a lot of IT systems to manage their business, their government. And a lot of those need to get connected down. Now people like in the safety people, public safety, want to know things about what's happening in buildings, in roads and stuff like that because they're trying to manage safety incidents or emergencies. Now what's special about smart city cybersecurity? Because that's what we're particularly focused on, the group I'm in. It's always been like, cyber, I just use the two things because I always come from an old risk management background. And to me, risks is likelihood times impact. You can make it more cybersecurity by intent or whatever way you want to do that, but that's just those two factors from my perspective. And if you look at a smart city, I think the likelihood of an attack on a smart city is high and getting higher and very important. First of all, there's a lot of systems with lots of interconnections, so that's going to increase the likelihood that somebody's going to want to attack it, or something will just naturally happen. You've got more things involved. And cities rely upon all these systems. There's a lot of this, particularly with the smart city initiatives, there's a lot more use of, these programs are doing widespread deployment of things using Wi-Fi networks or city networks, broadband networks, that I think make them more vulnerable. And as I just mentioned a moment ago, there's this very big growing use of IIoT, what we would call IIoT, they would call IoT, but lots of devices, sensors of all kinds of things hooked to little systems to do lots of things. Again, so those are certainly very subject to attacks. So that's from the likelihood side. The main thing that I found interesting, or I find very interesting, is from the impact side. Before I really got involved with smart cities, I mean, there's lots of people in smart cities, but you just don't appreciate how much impact you can have with a failure of something. And it just made me think, like, even if you had like a failure of the Northeast grid in the United States, obviously we all consider that's a major event. But if you think of where the major problems are going to occur, it's going to be in New York City and Boston, in those major places where people are concentrated. So in cities, you have a lot of people, you have a lot of businesses, so the impact of any kind of disruption is amplified. The other thing that we've seen, and it actually, when Andy Bachman talks about the paper, it kind of sensitized me to this very much, is how impacts cascade. You have a failure in one thing that causes an overload on another thing, on another thing, on another thing. So the impact is multiplied, or magnified, I guess is the right word. And if you think of it today, I think the opportunity cost, or the opportunities you know, one of the things that comes in with cybersecurity risk is why is everybody said in the last panel and a couple times today, you know, people only attack places where they can cause a problem, and I think a smart city is a fantastic target if I wanted to cause damage, certain kind of damage from certain kind of attackers. So that certainly makes them more likely they'll be attacked. And if you look at the cybersecurity strategies that are involved there, when we've dug into it to the extent we have so far, you know, it's a real combination of IT cybersecurity, ICS cybersecurity, IIoT cybersecurity. You can't separate them because all this stuff is interconnected in one way or another. And then cities also, from a security strategy perspective, you need to kind of have an integrated strategy. And then another big issue we see in smart cities is that if you might say, I have a plant and I have to coordinate lots of systems and lots of things, but now you go to a smart city and you have all these things run by all these different people. I mean, you have people in buildings that are managing building management systems. You have the government manage certain things. You have schools, you have hospitals. They're all managing their own stuff. And so strategy is needed to somehow integrate all that together. Now, what I want to do here, that's my presentation with respect to cybersecurity, but I wanted to relate something. If you remember about a month ago, there was this power failure in the Atlanta airport. My luck, I got caught in it. My wife and I were coming back from a cruise, and we left, I forget, it was or Miami, I think, and we flew through Atlanta to get to Richmond, Virginia, which is where I usually fly into. And we got to Atlanta, we landed, we sat in the plane for about 4.5 hours. We realized while we were there that it was a big power failure in the thing, but I'm just sitting there waiting and waiting and waiting. And eventually we deplaned they brought out steps. They couldn't take the plane into the gates because they couldn't do anything with the planes that were in there. There were like 90 planes on the ground. And it ended up when I got inside, there was like 30,000 people stuck in this outage. Now, you know, you've all been in problems like in the winter and stuff like that. This was a little different because of the loss of services too. So I just got some pictures here I just want to explain to you or show you. And while I was sitting there in the plane, as upset, you know, I'm a patient person to a point, but 4 hours is a little long, you know? But anyhow, I just started thinking, my gosh, you know, I'm doing this stuff with smart cities, and this was just like a smart city event, because what happened was we lost power at the airport, which I still question, by the way. They say it was a fire, but the fire was somehow in one room that they had their primary feeds and their backup feeds and everything in one room. And as an engineer, I just say, whoever designed that should be fired if that was true, but I really questioned it. I was very suspicious, as you could imagine, it was a cyber event. I don't know that it was or wasn't. But, you know, because the power failure we had, you couldn't use the gates, you couldn't use a lot of stuff. And so then whenever I went into the airport, I mean, this is a picture getting off the plane. I didn't take these. I actually got them off the internet. The thing actually frustrated me. There were a lot of better things to take pictures of, but everybody took videos today. So there were all these videos posted. I couldn't get any pictures, and I didn't want to sit there looking at the videos. But anyway, this was how I got off the plane. Everybody walked inside. This is what we saw when we got inside. This was about probably like 6 o'clock in the afternoon. And these are people sitting around. This was a cute thing because if you know it was Atlanta Airport, and if you know Atlanta Airport, I was in A gate, and we got off the plane. And A gate, luckily, is closest to the place where the baggage is and to get out. I didn't expect to get baggage. I just wanted to get out of there, get out of the airport area. But we had to go down these escalators because you have to go down escalators. You take a train that wasn't running, of course. The escalators weren't working, so you had to walk about a mile. Then you go back up the escalators. And one of the cute things was, and this was very nice, actually. I mean, this fellow who's coming down the escalator, I saw him. Somebody else took this picture, but I saw this guy. But one thing I noticed as I was going through the airport that amplified this thing again, I'm just trying to make this point about impact. And this was a minor thing in a way. But there were a lot of people who happened to be on the plane I was on that were in wheelchairs, very old people. Now you say to them, oh, no problem, you just have to walk a mile, go down these escalators, go down and go back up. So at where we were coming back up, this guy who worked in the luggage area, he kept sliding down the middle of it. I don't know how he missed some of the things that were in the middle too, by the way. But he was sliding down, and then they were actually carrying people up the escalators that weren't working. So it was very nice of him. But anyhow, so then we got up to the top, and then we said, okay, I said to my wife, well, let's rent a car. which was really stupid on my part because there were obviously no cars. So then I said, well, we'll just get a taxi. We went outside. The line for the taxi had thousands of people, literally. So when we got outside, the taxis were all jammed up because so many taxis coming into one place. I'm trying to make a point here about cascading effects. So we tried to do something with the sail, and I was standing around. And by the way, it was like 30 degrees in Atlanta. This happened to have happened on a night when there was when it was very cold. Yeah, and I just came back from a vacation on a cruise, so I was certainly not prepared for it. So we went outside and we stood there, and my wife and I were outside for about 2 hours trying to get something to go somewhere. Finally, I jumped in a van and just said, I don't care where you're going, I'm going out of here, luckily we got to Atlanta and got a hotel room, which was rare. But the other thing that happened is I was standing there and all these people said, oh, don't worry, I'm going to get an Uber, all right? So everybody's trying to use their phone. None of the phones worked. Now, it wasn't that anything went wrong with the cell system. They didn't lose it for power. It was just totally overloaded. So people, the best they could do were send text messages around, which didn't really help me much. So, and then the other thing I thought was interesting was, this was the day after. You know the kind of mess you get when you try to, once flights are disrupted, then everybody sits around trying to get another flight out and all that kind of stuff. But, oh, there was a slide that's not in there. Where was it? Oh, there it is. I just wanted to make this point, too. This was the poor mayor, though I don't have much sympathy for him at the moment, or at that time when this happened. But he's trying to answer questions from all of these newspaper people, or journalists and everything. I mean, because the outage was a total of about 12 or 16 hours or something like that. They ran out of food. They had to bring in, they sent out stuff for Chick-fil-A, all these people stranded. But they're asking him questions like, well, what happened? I don't know. When's it going to end? I don't know. So could you imagine being in that situation? Again, that's a major impact we always talk about, his reputation. His reputation, I don't know if he'll be reelected, who knows, but I mean, I don't have anything against the guy. But anyhow, all of this had these kind of elements to it. But again, the point from my perspective and why we look at cybersecurity for smart cities is this issue with impact. And I think that's a major impact. That was the day after people trying to get back on the planes.